Last week we talked about Joseph and how his whole family moved to Egypt to be safe and to have food to eat, and he took care of them. But many years passed, and Joseph, the children grew up, and they had children, and they had children, and they had children, and pretty soon there were lots and lots of their descendants who lived there in Egypt. And the king, well, the rulers no longer remembered the Joseph who had helped them, and because there had been many kings that had come and gone through those years, and they no longer really liked having the Israelites or the Hebrews there, which is what they called Joseph's family. And they tried to they decided that there were getting to be too many of them and that they were going to take over if they weren't careful. So they made them into slaves. And a slave is somebody who one person makes another person work for them, but they don't pay them. And they don't have the option of not working for them. They have to do it. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, the person who owns you can beat you or mistreat you, and you have no rights. You have nothing that you can do about it. And so that's what happened to the Hebrews, is they became slaves, and their jobs were to probably work in the fields, but also they made bricks for the buildings and the things that the Egyptians were making. And it wasn't like going to Home Depot to get bricks. They had to gather up the ingredients, the clay, and mix in the straw, and put them into little containers so that they would, and put them out in the hot sun to dry. It was very, very labor intensive, and they worked very, very hard. But even still, the Hebrews continued to multiply, and there were more and more of them. So the Pharaoh, or the king, he came up with this idea. He was going to have all the boy babies killed, and so that they wouldn't keep multiplying so much. And that didn't work either, because, well, the Hebrews didn't kill their babies, and they lived, and they continued to prosper. And there was one particular family who had a little baby, and his name was Moses, or at least that's the name that we know him by. And Moses' family didn't want to get rid of him. They wanted to keep him and take care of him and let him grow. And so when he was born, his mother hid him, and so that nobody knew that she had a baby. And the soldiers would come by, and they would work very hard to make sure the baby stayed very quiet when the soldiers came by, or when any of the Egyptians were around. But he was getting older, and it was a little difficult to continue to do that. And so she knew she was going to have to do something, or the soldiers were going to come and take her baby away from her. And so she had an idea. And I think God probably gave her some direction, because it's kind of no one would ever think of doing this, but this is what she did. The Bible says that she took a basket, and she coated the inside of the basket with pitch or tar to make it waterproof. And then she took her baby and she wrapped him up in a blanket, and she put him inside of the basket. And then she put a lid on top of it to keep it safe. And she and her older daughter went down to the river. And there in the grass, the tall grass that grew on the sides of the river, they placed the basket. Now, his mom went back to the house, but his older sister Miriam stayed and kind of hid away and watched just to see what would happen, to see who was going to find him, or if anybody did. Sure enough, because they kind of knew, the king's daughter, the princess, would come to this area of the river to bathe. She and her servants would come down. And so that particular day, as they were walking by, the princess saw the basket sitting kind of over in the grass. And she had some of her servants go over and get the basket. And she was like, I wonder what's in this basket that somebody has put it in the river. So they took the basket, and she opened the basket, and she saw the baby. And he was so precious, and she knew he was one of the Hebrew children that they were trying to hide. But she didn't have the heart to give the baby over to the soldiers. she kind of fell in love with the baby. And so she decided that she was going to take that precious little baby and she was going to claim it as her own because she didn't have any children. So about that time, Moses' big sister comes up and she says, if you're going to keep the baby, you're going to need somebody to nurse it and take care of it. I know of a Hebrew woman who could do that for you if you'd like. And so she said, okay. Well, of course, Miriam went and got her mother. And so her mother was able to take care of baby Moses until he got older, until he was weaned or he was old enough to go and live at the Pharaoh's castle. And that's what he did. Now, there are many stories about Joseph, or things that you can imagine would have happened to Moses during those years. He was raised as though he were one of the grandsons of the Pharaoh. I'm sure he was able to get all the best of education of the times. He was fed well. He had nice clothes to wear. He was taken care of. And this is God's plan because he has a very, very special task for Moses that we're going to talk about next week. Hope you enjoyed this story, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.